Genesis chapter 43, we will be considering the first 15 verses. Genesis 43, verses 1 through 15. Why don't we pray? Heavenly Father, we have gathered together once more today under the name of Christ. And through Him, we make this plea, and we ask that you would feed us today from your Word. You'd make your Word come alive. We know what it is to read your Word and it just be words on a page, and then all the difference it makes when these things land upon us with a sense of reality and weight and truth. And we find ourselves in our own lives in the things that we read, and we ask for great help. We ask for hearing ears and open hearts to your truth. I pray today that you would encourage and strengthen your people. Amen. Well, the title I've given this message today, these first 15 verses, is A Desperate Patriarch. A Desperate Patriarch. And I'm referring here to Jacob and all the desperate situation he will find himself in as we go through these verses. I think will be a good summary for us as to what we see here. A desperate patriarch. Let me just begin very briefly by just kind of review and introduce this section. Review what we've covered and introduce what's ahead. Remember that our last time together we considered the great crucible that Joseph designed for his brothers, where he planted their money back in their bags so that even though he had been testing them in front of him, he designed it so that when they left on their journey, they would realize that they're in big trouble now with the Egyptians. They would spend the rest of their time traveling back, looking over their shoulder, waiting for some Egyptian official to come, seeking the money that looks like had been stolen from the Egyptians, the payment that was owed. They'd taken off with it, and it was in their bags, and they had all their food that they had gone to purchase. They went down to Egypt to buy food. They got the food. They have all this money. They've got so much food. They've got donkeys loaded with food. They've come back with these provisions. But what they don't have is their brother. And the appearance to the Egyptians is that they've stolen the money. The appearance to their family back home will be that they've sold their brother in exchange for the money and kept the money. And sold their brother in exchange for the food and kept their money. And that's certainly the accusation that's made by their father, by Jacob. It appears that his sons now have lost two sons for him, both Joseph, and he blames them for that, and then now Simeon. And so the tensions at camp are severe. The way that the brothers even, they began to feel the guilt. We could see that. Even in Egypt, they were beginning to feel the guilt. Then on their way back, when they saw that they had the money, they even said, "What is this God has done to us?" Like they are realizing that God is after them and not letting them get away with the sins of their past. And they feel that they're being hounded by God. They cannot explain what's happening to them. They get to camp, and they're met with the expectations with the greetings there that they would have expected from their father, who's blaming them for all of this. You could imagine what it would be like over the next few months as their rations are slowly dwindling. The famine's not letting up. The accusations continue. One brother is feeling tremendously guilty. Maybe the other one is having a moment of relief from his guilt, and he happens to be enjoying the warmth of the day, and a smile breaks out across his face, and the other brother sees it and thinks, "How can you smile with all that's going on?" And he's just slain in his own heart. And then the other one sees, he's doing well, and he looks and he sees his brother weeping under the tree because of what he's doing and feeling the guilt, and he just slays himself and thinks, "How can I feel this way? What have we done?" And you can imagine how this would play out among them. And this is exactly, it appears, what actually happened. So there is this test of their character, this crucible that Joseph designed for them. He didn't know it would work out so wonderfully, but he continues to want to test them. And we will see later in this chapter that he's not done testing them and seeing what they're made of before he attempts to reconcile. If Joseph were to reveal who he was to them before he knows what's in their heart, it becomes almost impossible to reconcile. These are the sons, his brothers, who sold him into slavery because they were angry with him. And you could imagine now if he says, I am Joseph, and they realize that, they would just beg for forgiveness and reconciliation out of the mere idea of self-preservation, not out of repentance and genuine reconciliation. You could never know whether they had really wanted to reconcile and they were truly sorry for what they'd done. So he's out to find that out. But our scene today, at least in chapter 43, the first, what we'll be considering today, we're still in Canaan. We've not gone back yet to Joseph. And so we're still in Canaan, and this is where this scene takes place. The reason this crucible that Joseph designed was so effective, even there in Canaan, was because he wasn't the only one using it. God himself began to work in the hearts of his family while they were in the crucible. In this trial, we will see more about that today. But in addition to that, we'll also consider today this desperate family situation, especially for Jacob. We will also see the hand of God, and I think there will be real encouragement in that for all of us today. So let's read then these first 15 verses and learn about the desperation of Jacob. Chapter 43, verse 1. Now the famine was severe in the land. And when they had eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, Go again, buy us a little food. But Judah said to him, The man solemnly warned us, saying, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, for the man said to us, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Israel said, Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? And they replied, The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, Bring your brother down? And Judah said to Israel his father, Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would have returned twice. We would now have returned twice. Then their father Israel said to them, If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags, and carry a present down to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, then I am bereaved. So the men took this present, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. All right. So let's just work through the text. Verse 1, we have the setting put before us here. Now the famine was severe in the land. So if we think of it this way, the brothers have returned to their father, and some time has gone by. enough time to notice that the famine was getting worse. I don't say it was years or anything like that, but it was bad. During that time, the famine in the land had become much worse. Instead of having extra rations to supplement the lesser harvest, remember they were in famine, but typically famine doesn't mean nothing. Famine means, we have 100 people to feed, but instead of the land producing enough for 120 people, we're only got enough for 50 people. And so everyone's on rations, and it's just a matter where we need food. Eventually, it gets really bad, and we are not going to survive. We've got to send somewhere else to get more food. And that's what they did. They sent the boys down there, the sons, they're grown men now, they have children of their own, down there to Egypt to buy grain, to bring it up so that they could make it through the rest of the famine, however long they thought it might be, maybe the rest of the season, that kind of thing. And so, but the problem is the famine has worsened. Instead of maybe producing 60% of what the land usually did, now we could just throw a number out there, maybe it's only producing 30% or 20%. Or one of the main crops that was supposed to come in failed utterly before we could harvest it now. And now it's even worse. And we had to go through almost all the supplies. And now that it says, when they had eaten the grain that they brought from Egypt, they've finished up all the supplies. And all they have left is just whatever meager rations they can get out of the land. It's not much. The famine had become worse. Things were significantly harder than they anticipated, and so the rations they purchased in Egypt are no longer going to be enough. They've run out. Imagine the sons of Jacob in this situation. Not only had they lost their brother Simeon, but their father finally got around to blaming them for what has happened to Joseph, and was very suspicious of them for returning without Simeon. Things at camp were very tense, very sad. And now you're in a famine that is itself getting worse by the day. I mean, on your way back home, you're thinking, God is against us. And now you get home, and the famine, which is bad, is way worse. And the trip you made to Egypt, which was supposed to get you enough food to last quite a while, is run out, and there's nothing left. And what are you going to do? You're going to feel your guilt even more. I mean, it's getting worse. The weight of guilt could only be increasing. So this is the situation. The worsening famine forces Jacob's hand. Look at verse 2. And when they had eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." Buy us a little food. Now, Jacob knew what his sons had told him. Remember, if the ruler of the land, the Lord of the land said, unless you men you're saying you're not spies. If you're not spies, then I'm going to keep one of your brothers here, and you guys go and bring back this other brother you talked about, and bring him back. And if you don't bring him back, you will not live. Okay. Jacob remembers that he said that, but he doesn't mention that. He just says, hey, go get us a little bit, just a little food. They had asked to take Benjamin, but when Jacob commands his sons to go to Egypt, he mentions nothing about sending Benjamin. He doesn't say, go down there and take your brother Benjamin with you. He just says, you guys go on down there. He's not talking about Benjamin. He's not talking to Benjamin. He's talking to them. You guys go and get us a little food. It seems clear to me that he's trying to avoid a situation in which Benjamin will have to go to Egypt, so he doesn't mention him. But not only does he not mention Benjamin, but he also reduces the amount of grain he's sending them to go get this time. It's amazing. This time he specifically requests they only get, quote, a little food. Just get a small amount of food. Now, in order to set that in contrast with what they were likely to have purchased before, think of several factors. What do we mean a little food versus what they got before? The last time they went, they brought at least 10 donkeys with them and had them loaded with grain to make the return trip. They maybe had a lot more than that, but at least 10 donkeys. More than that, we could consider the number of people they were hoping to keep alive with these supplies. Later in Genesis, it tells us that counting Jacob, but not counting any of his wives, not counting any of his daughters, and not counting any female in the entire camp, there were 66 people in all. This was also just his descendants, not counting any servants. Just his male descendants and Jacob, 66 people went down to Egypt. in just a short time from now. And so just a matter of weeks or a month maybe. So this is the idea that there are a lot of people they were bringing back supplies for, extra rations. So there was likely lots of food that they were purchasing. It's not surprising then when you think about them going to Egypt, making a purchase of grain that significant that they had to stand in front of Joseph, the Lord of the land. Of course they're going to have to answer to some official. This is a lot of purchase that they're making, a huge purchase. Well, this time Jacob is saying, let's try to just get a little bit, and maybe, I think the idea is maybe, with a purchase of a smaller amount, you won't find this guy won't lay his eyes on you, and we'll get the grain and we can get out of there and we can make it. Maybe this will work. Just get a little food. Again, buying less food, perhaps his sons will be able to avoid running into the ruler of Egypt, who his sons say treated them so harshly. Perhaps if they go and buy less, they can avoid an encounter so doomed to failure. It's also worth noting here that at this point at least, Jacob is not speaking to his sons about rescuing Simeon. Simeon is lost, as far as he's concerned. He's still unwilling at this point to pay the price of sending Benjamin on the chance that maybe Simeon would get sprung from prison. Look, you guys left Simeon down there. I'm not sending Benjamin. I'm not willing to lose him. And so Simeon is lost. It's amazing. Benjamin is not a price he's willing to pay and willing to risk. So Simeon is just lost. That's still the way it is in Jacob's mind. So then, let's continue reading and learn about the objections of a son. Verses 3 through 5, the objections of a son. Judah here, we'll just read those verses. But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" So Judah here speaks up for the sons as a group. Right? It says, "But Judah said to him." So this is what Jacob says to his sons, these 9 that are left here. Of course, Joseph is sold as a slave in Egypt. He's ruling Egypt now. Simeon is in prison under Joseph's command, though he doesn't know who's got him there. He doesn't know Joseph's identity. And Benjamin is not going. And so there are 9 sons left. And to those sons, he told them to get up and go down there and buy a little food. Judah then, in speaking up for the whole group, speaks to their father. And you might wonder at this. Judah, you may remember, had left the family, had departed from God. He'd apostatized. He'd sought his life elsewhere in Canaan with the pagans. But his sinfulness, remember that chapter, Judah and Tamar, the whole chapter there, his sinfulness had led him down a path he did not expect. And God himself was pursuing him down that path with his eye upon him, watching Judah run to the end of the rope, so to speak, where Judah would be confronted with his own moral failures and his own shame and his weakness and sinfulness. It so happened, because God was in the midst of it, that he was cut to the heart. Judah repented of his sin and was restored to his family, and more importantly, restored unto God. We saw him make the trip to Egypt with his brothers. On their return trip from Egypt, Reuben, who was the oldest but who had forfeited his birthright by his rebellion, sought again to ingratiate himself in his father's goodwill and suggested one of the dumbest plans ever to be spoken. Right? Remember, they get back and they don't have Simeon and they want Benjamin, and Jacob says, "No, you'll not have him." And Reuben's like, "I have an idea. Entrust him to me, Dad." Right? "And if I don't return Benjamin to you, then you can kill my 2 sons, that is, your 2 grandsons." It's like the dumbest idea ever. I mean, this was his suggestion, right? "I will take Benjamin with me, and if he doesn't return with me, and Simeon as well, then you can kill my 2 sons. And this he suggested to the grandfather of the boys he was offering up for slaughter. Well, thanks. I can lose 2 more descendants. I can, by my own hand, I'll kill them myself this time. Reuben, stop talking, right? I mean, that would be the idea. It's incredible. So this was Reuben. Well, among his sons, who all knew there was no way that the ruler of Egypt would allow them to get in and out of Egypt without bringing Benjamin, who's going to speak to Jacob and convince Jacob that this is something they have to do? It was not Simeon, as he was stuck in a cell in Egypt, nor was it to be Levi, who had already forfeited his birthright as well through his misconduct. The next oldest was Judah. Now, of course, he had earlier abandoned his family, but evidently his return to his family was in such a manner that over time he had earned the confidence of his father. He was bearing fruit in keeping with repentance. He seems to have been a changed man. In terms of how he might view things, in his own view, whereas before he had abandoned the family, now he was stepping into the leadership role that was his among the now middle-aged sons of Jacob. He was first in line. He wasn't firstborn, but the title of firstborn and the responsibilities and the privileges that came with it had fallen to him, if he was able to bear it. And it seems that he was. He had the confidence of his father, as we'll see. But in terms of Jacob's perspective, it seems that his son Judah had earned his confidence, and he was willing to hear the objection of the sons as a group, provided it was Judah who brought them to him. Judah could speak to him. Levi certainly couldn't. Judah could. This is truly a very positive indication of the condition of Judah's soul. Later we'll read that Jacob says, on his dying bed, that the scepter, the right to rule, will not depart from Judah. And we see that even now, Judah has begun to step into that role among the sons of Jacob. He's the one leading them, representing them, bearing responsibility. So let's look at that then in verse 3. But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" So Judah, first thing he does, he reminds Jacob, his father, that the warning they received from this ruler of Egypt, whoever he was no idle threat. It was a solemn warning. And just to remind you of the way Moses reported that to us earlier, I'm going to read from, and you could turn there if you like, but Genesis chapter 42, verses 17 through 20. And listen to this. "And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. And on the 3rd day Joseph said to them, 'Do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody. Let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will be verified, and you shall not die.'" And then just a few verses later, Moses tells us, "And he returned to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes." This sounds and looks like a solemn warning. But Moses uses the words, or reports the speech of Joseph to us as, "Do this and you will live." And then, "If you do this, your words will be verified and you shall not die." When Judah reports this same statement, this activity, this warning to his father, he uses the words, "The man said, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" And I just want to pause for a second, because the Bible uses this phrase, "to see someone's face," several times, and one of the times it uses it is whether men can see the face of God and live, and this sort of thing. So I want to just pause here for a minute, and I think we are given a helpful clue as readers of the Bible as to what this phrase, "to see someone's face," really means. It doesn't just mean that they won't catch a glimpse of his face. When Judah says, "The man said we won't see his face," he's paraphrasing the words, "The man said, if you don't do this, you're going to die." The idea here is of when you get to see someone's face in this term, these in this way of using the phrase, it's to meet them face to face with their approval and to be accepted by them when the expectation was that you might not. Like, the result is kind of in the balance, and you're going to be approved and welcomed and accepted. Now, let's let that sink in for a second. The Bible says no man can see the face of God and live. In other words, men are in such a position before God that coming before Him, they might be apprehensive about it and think, I don't know how it might go, God. They have hopes. Maybe God would approve of me, but the fear is that He might not because they have guilt. And the Bible says no man can see the face of God and live. The threat that Joseph spoke to his brothers is the same kind of threat that God gives to us as sinners, right? It's no man can see my face and live. You're going to, for a man, a sinful man, to come before God, the verdict, it's certain, it's sure. The man's going to be condemned. He won't live. How precious the gospel appears when you think of it in this way. And of course, we know this is the reality, but just to think of all that is there in that phrase, to see His face, what would the result be? Well, these men say, Judah says, look, he said, we will not see His face unless your brother is with you. The man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. And so Judah reminds his father of all of that. And so having urged upon his father the seriousness of the situation in Egypt, look, we're not going to just be able to sneak in and out of there. If he sees us, he's going to kill us. We won't see his face. Having said that, Judah now offers his father two options. He says, look, Dad, if you want us to go, there's only two situations. There's only two possibilities from your request. First of all, option 1, verse 4. What does he say? If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. Right? Which means something like, look, if you will send Benjamin, then we will obey you. We will go down to Egypt. We will face the ruler of Egypt. Though there's great risk in doing so, because they might think we're thieves because of the money we took, and it's been a while, he might wonder what took so long. He might not believe that Benjamin's our brother, but we'll risk it. We will go. If you'll send Benjamin, we will go, because there's also hope that we might return with our brother and with the needed food to keep us all alive. So we'll go. Option 2, verse 5. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. Because the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Right? If you will not send Benjamin, and we go down because of, then we will not go down because of what this man said. It would be a death sentence. We will not go down there to die simply because you won't send Benjamin with us. Nope. We will take our chances here with the famine. Though that may mean death as well, it's at least further down the road. It's at least a little less certain. Something might break here. It doesn't look good, but it might change a little bit. We might not all die. But if we go down there without our brother Benjamin, we will all die, nor will we have food to bring back. So when you hear all of this and you think about it, one of the things it ought to make you realize that if Jacob had anywhere else he could send his son to get provisions, he would have done so. Right? The famine is so bad, it's so widespread, that there's simply nowhere else to get food. You remember his grandfather, Abraham, had a friend named Mamre. And at those oaks of Mamre, that place where he owned, became a place called Hebron. And he settled there, and he lived peacefully in the land there for many years. And his father Isaac settled in Hebron as well. That's where Jacob went to visit him before he died. Isaac was there, and you would imagine, in time of need, where might Jacob turn? Maybe he'd go to the longtime family friends in Hebron. There's no help to be found there. There's no help in the once fruitful plains of Sodom. No help to be had in the recent reunion he'd had with his brother Esau and the strong nation that was forming there. No help there. Everyone in the area is languishing in the famine. And everyone's looking to Egypt, the only place. None of these other places knew that a famine would come. And none of these other places had such abundance as Egypt did in the years leading up to the famine. But only in Egypt, under this ruler of Egypt, is there food for the people. Jacob is desperate. There's nowhere else he can turn. He has to go and send his children to the one, in order to get food and keep everyone alive, to the one person who's threatened their very lives and suspects them all of being dishonest spies. So he thinks. So when Jacob hears this argument from Judah, verse 6 now, there's this unspoken, I think, frustrations that he's had just comes out. Verse 6. He may have said this before, but it certainly comes out here. He says in verse 6, Israel said, "Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother?" It is as if by being reminded of just how stuck he was in this corner with no good way out, he just lashes out in anger, giving voice to his pent-up frustrations and his resentments. He has interpreted the behavior of his sons in Egypt as not only failing him personally, like you should have done better and you failed me on the mission I sent you at, but as badly treating him. Why did you treat me so badly? Why would you do that to me? He cannot hardly believe he's in such a situation as this, one in which his entire happiness, his entire joy is on the verge of being taken from him with no way to confidently prevent it. Think of this, the great love of his life was Rachel. And she was lost while they were traveling on the run because of some other stupid thing two of his sons had done in murdering an entire town. And he leaves. And on the way, his beloved wife is lost in childbirth. And they're in such haste as they travel that there's not even time to bury her properly in the proper place. They just bury her along the side of the road somewhere, and it's halfway a dishonor to his lovely wife. Then his favored son, Joseph, Rachel's firstborn, and the only faithful son he had at that time, was lost while he was away looking for his disobedient children who were not doing what he told them to do. Likely Joseph, in his mind, was torn apart by an animal, and somehow, though he's not exactly sure, he's convinced this is all the fault of his vengeful and hateful other sons. Those same sons have now recently abandoned one of their own sons, then Egypt, under some harsh ruler, and that guy wants Benjamin to go to Egypt. And now these boys want to risk everything to go get food from the one person who can help them. Jacob is terrified. He's very upset at this idea that his sons have let it come to this, and he blames them for it. How could you have mishandled things so badly to put me in this situation? He's furious. And then all of the sons now respond to Jacob in verse 7. They replied, "The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?' What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" So evidently the conversation that was taking place between Judah and Jacob was in front of the other brothers, or at least some of them. And in this instance, when Jacob complains about their giving all this information to such a hostile Egyptian ruler, the sons of Jacob offer an explanation to their father in order to clear them of guilt. Essentially, they are saying that in order to buy food on their last trip, they were forced to clear themselves of the charge of being spies. In the process of clearing themselves of that charge, the ruler of Egypt began asking them very direct and very personal questions about their family, which were unusual to have been asked, but which they felt they had to ask, and they naturally answered honestly maybe for the first time in their life, they answered honestly and openly confessed what the situation was because they were on the defensive and they were just trying to prove themselves. The information they gave, to their surprise, was used by the Egyptian ruler to demand that their missing brother make the next trip with them and to require them to keep one brother back. Surely they had... So the question is, how could they know that the ruler of Egypt would insist on something like that? Surely they had not deliberately or lazily mistreated their father in this situation. That's their plea. And judging by Judah's response, he knows they're right. Or he believes them at least, partially. But he had spoken earlier out of just all this frustration and pain. As of yet, he has still not relented to send Benjamin. But now Judah speaks up and he does something, Judah speaks up and does something very unexpected. So the brothers have explained what had happened, and then Judah takes the lead again. We again see Judah acting as the head of his brothers, taking responsibility and initiative among his brothers. He makes his case to Jacob as to why sending Benjamin with them is the right thing to do and is reasonable considering the circumstances that they find themselves in. He begins by asking his father to send Benjamin. We're going to consider verses 8 through 10. This is Judah's plea, Judah's argument. He asks his father to send Benjamin. Verse 8, and Judah said to Israel his father, send the boy with me, and we will arise and go. The request is simple, isn't it? Entrust the boy to me, and we will rise and go. First, there are, I think, three basic elements here. First, when he calls Benjamin boy, it's a bit curious, as while Benjamin is certainly the younger than his brothers, he's also a father in his own right with several children at this point. But he says the boy, calls him the boy. I think there's an element of, he's kind of being sympathetic with his father here. His father's love for him. He said, send the boy with me. Send the boy with me. Second, even though all of the brothers will go on this trip, Judah only mentions Benjamin as being sent with him. Send the boy with me. He doesn't say, send the boy with us. What could go wrong? He says, send him with me. He distinguishes himself, I think, from the rest of the brothers. Entrust him to me. Right? He's not pleading with his father on the basis of the trustworthiness of his other brothers, but rather on his own reliability. That again, I think, points to the confidence Judah has earned in the eyes of his father since his return to the family some time ago. Third thing that's mentioned is just the simplicity of the journey. We will arise and go. Right? That kind of takes all the, think about it. When you have something maybe you're worried about, it's some simple thing, but there's all this other stuff that complicates it and you're terribly worried. And someone says, to you, like maybe it's just, you're worried about showing up to work the next day because of all these different things that happen. And someone says to you, and they know what's going on, they say, listen, just go to work, do your job, go home. Why are they saying it's so simple? It's not that simple. Well, they're saying it that way to allay your fears, that you would just calm down and not worry about the things you can't control and just do the things that's in front of you to do. And this is the way Judah speaks to his father. Look, just give the boy to me, and we will arise and we'll go. It'll be all right. Right? It reduces all of the worry in Jacob's mind concerning the trip into one actionable decision. Let's get up and go. So then there is this argument that he makes that follows. So this is the plea. This is the request. Give him to me and we'll rise and go. But then he makes an argument. He says, the first thing he does is he reminds Jacob of the great need for this course of action. There's a great need for us to do this. He says, that we may live and not die, both we and you and also our little ones. That's significant. Look, we are going to die without these supplies. And not just we brothers, and your sons and daughters, but you also. He says, but we and you And not just we and you, but also our little ones. Your grandchildren are going to die if you don't send us. It's a good argument, right? That's a pretty good one. Your children will die. Your grandchildren will die. You will die. Come on. You have to send us. Second argument he makes. He deliberately takes center stage and bears responsibility himself for Benjamin. Look at verse 9. I will be a pledge of his safety, and from my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. So he offers himself as security for Benjamin. But unlike his foolish brother Reuben, who offered the life of his 2 sons in order to act as a pledge, here Judah offers himself. He also states very simply what his mission concerning Benjamin would be. Quote, bring him back to you and set him before you. But also in contrast to Reuben's suggestion, Judah does not offer lifeblood and security for Benjamin's safety. Remember, Reuben said, look, if you don't send him, then, you could kill my 2 sons. Take their lifeblood. Judah doesn't offer lifeblood. He offers something maybe more significant in their family. More surprising. He offers his place of leadership and his birthright within the family. I'll bear the guilt of it all my life. Right? You've taken the birthright away from Reuben and Simeon and Levi for their bad conduct, and it's now fallen to me. If I fail you in this, I'll bear the guilt of it. I'll lose the place of preeminence. It's gone. In one sense, this is far less than the offer of his own lifeblood, right? I mean, he's still going to be alive. What's the big deal? But in another sense, think of this, who he's talking to. Jacob knows from his own life how such ambition for inheritance and being first for that position can dominate a man's life. It had dominated his life in his time growing up with his brother Esau. In his own life, he never did stop pursuing that until God changed him as a man. But for Judah, by offering up his position of prominence among his brothers and being willing to bear the guilt all of his life and never get out of it, I think Judah spoke in a way that his father understood and gained the decision he wanted from his father. He secured the decision. It showed just how much Judah had changed, right? He wasn't just vying to get the best position. He was willing to say, look, if I don't do it, then I failed you. And you can take it away from me. And for Jacob, he knew just how much that meant. He knew the way those boys had acted and the way his sons had been. He knew the way he was growing up. And until God had made a difference, that's all that he wanted. And now he sees his son Judah saying, that's not the most important thing. We need to stay alive. And if I fail you, then I'll lose it. The third thing Judah does in verse 10 is he reminds his father once again that while the journey is in fact dangerous, it's not too far a trip, and the need itself is urgent. He says in verse 10, if we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice. It's not, yes, there's danger, but it's not insurmountable. Most likely, since the time they knew that they needed more food, whenever that time came up, that became the question around camp. Are we going to go? What are we going to do? And they were delaying. And that delay had eventually got to the place where finally Judah said, need to go. And then they were arguing back and forth about whether they would go or not. And in this delay, it's now delayed long enough that they could have made the trip twice. Jacob has put them all in greater danger by not acting already. The food is still getting more scarce. Everyone's looking a little more famished. They're losing more weight. Things aren't good. It's time to go to Egypt. So then in verses 11 through 14, Jacob gives his permission for what Judah had requested. And he also, though, declares his own plan. He's got a plan. So you can go, but this is the plan. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's how you're going to do it. So in verse 11, then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Right? All right, if it's got to be, so he's convinced, he's persuaded, then this is what we're going to do. Right? There are a number of things, I think 4 elements to this plan. Okay, I'll just mention them briefly. First of all, you're going to prepare a present for the man. Secondly, you're going to take the money you should have given them last time and take it with you, along with new money for supplies this time. Third, you're going to bring your brother and go to the man and make sure we take care of this. And then fourth, we're going to cast ourselves on God and His mercy. Those are the 4 elements of the plan. All right? Let's look at those in turn. First of all, prepare this present. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man. A little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. The very first part of this plan includes taking the best of what they have left. There's a famine on. There's not a lot of this left. Some of it might be stored up from a while ago, right? Take the best of whatever scarce produce they can gather in the land and the best of what is in their possessions. Gather it up. The choice fruits, listen to what he says though, a little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. We don't have a lot to give, but take the little we have and send it, right? I mean, they're on meek rations here, and they're taking what they have, the best of what they can find, and sending it as a gift to try to earn this man's favor, if that could be done. Before we go any further, it's important to me that you see the biting irony of this. Go to Genesis chapter 37. This is when the boys sold Joseph into slavery. They saw these caravan of Ishmaelites. Look at verse 25. They sat down to eat. Remember, Joseph's in the pit right now. They sat down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Right? But what happens? They go to those men and say, hey, for a little silver in our bags, we'll give you our brother. You can go down there, take all that stuff with you and sell it however you want. We want the money. Now, they all have bags of money. They're carrying with them all these same things and more as gifts to go down to Egypt with bags of money to exchange them for a son, for a brother. Don't think that's lost on them. Like, they are very aware of the kind of thing that's happening here. The irony. I mean, the price they're going to pay to get Simeon back has got to be like 5% of what they had, the price they took in order to sell Joseph. It's incredible. Here they are. On their journey. This is their plan. Next part of the plan. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. So the second part of the plan is to attempt to make amends for having made off with their payment money that belonged to the Egyptians on the last trip. The hope is that perhaps, maybe it was an oversight, and they might be forgiven, and it won't be held against them. It's kind of a long shot, but maybe, right? It had been different. The men took off with their money. They found the money, and they went right back and said, look, we found this. But they were afraid because of their guilty consciences. They didn't want to go back there and deal with things, so they just left. And then they found out it was way worse. They all had money in their sack, not just one of them. And they were terrified. This goes on for some matter of months. And then they come back. If I was an Egyptian ruler, let's suppose that the Egyptians thought it was stolen, that the money was gone. They didn't pay for it. You'd think, oh, now you return. You're dishonest men. You've come with the money, but it's only because you want more grain. It's not because you're honest men and giving me the money back. It's because you're dishonest. You're just desperate. That's why you're here. No, the price just tripled. You see? We're no fools. And so the likelihood that this works, I mean, you better do this, but it's not likely to succeed. The hope is maybe it's just an oversight and they'll think, oh, yeah, it's no problem. Thanks for being such good guys. You really are honest men, but it's not likely. So what's the third part? Take also your brother and arise, go again to the man. The third part of the plan is to go ahead and take Benjamin, but not just to go down there and maybe you bump into this guy, but go find the specific ruler who needs to see him and let's deal with him. Which before, again, I think the idea was maybe we could get in and out, but this time take Benjamin and let's go find the man and say what we need to say. Fourth part, most important one. Cast themselves on God. He says, may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may He send back your other brother and Benjamin. Kind of way to say it, your other brother and Benjamin. He doesn't even mention Simeon by name. May He send back your other brother and my boy Benjamin. Like, oh, things are... Certainly, Benjamin was not their primary concern. Their concern was their children and their brother, Simeon. To them, Benjamin was fine up here, but he needed to go or nothing good can happen in Egypt. So they're not really concerned with Benjamin. Jacob, however, is very concerned about Benjamin. And he says, look, but he's not only concerned about Benjamin. May this plan succeed. May you get your brother, who you're so worried about, who's in prison there, and may you also bring back Benjamin. So I don't think, it's not entirely just an us and them mentality. Like he's not just you and your brother and me and my son, but may we all have success together in this. The most important part of the plan is to throw themselves on the mercy of God Almighty, right? That the ruler of Egypt will give them favor and send both Benjamin and Simeon back to Canaan. Let's say it this way. No plan is complete as Christians. There is no, as humans, there's no plan we can make that is complete unless we have acknowledged our need for God's help, right? Unless God builds the house, those who build it labor in vain, right? No action is properly taken until we have cast ourselves in truth upon the goodness of God as helpless without Him, right? This was the only essential part of the plan. Nothing else was essential. This was essential, to cast themselves on God Almighty, that He might give them mercy in front of this Egyptian ruler. Finally then, Jacob declares his desperation and his fear. What does he say? Verse 14. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. This is perhaps one of the saddest scenes in the entire Joseph account. You see here that this old man is utterly broken, utterly desperate. You know, I say old, when he meets Pharaoh in a few weeks from now, he's 130. So he's at least 129, right? Getting ready to have his 130th birthday, right? What a thing. He's at least that old. This old man is utterly broken and desperate. He is at the end of himself. He doesn't make the trip. It's a hard trip. He doesn't make it. He doesn't attempt to go. He's lost several sons. He's without the only woman he ever loved. He's alone in the land of promise. And now all of his sons are heading to Egypt, where they have been accused of being spies. And from Egypt, they have the appearance of now being thieves. They are headed there to plead their honesty and to plead for the release of their brother who's in prison. More than that, they also need to purchase food and return with it, or else they will not survive much longer. Jacob and all of his descendants are in a place of absolute desperation. Their supplies have run out. Now is the time to go, There's no chance for delay. They must get more food, but in getting more food, they risk everything. If God does not grant them success, they will perish. Some would die in Egypt in prison. The rest would starve to death in Canaan. Those are your options. This is where it's come to. He says, as for me, if I'm bereaved of my children, then I am bereaved. Right? What will I do about it? If Judah returns, but somehow the plan has not worked, then Jacob says, look, I'll just bear the loss myself. I don't have the energy or the desire to punish anyone for any of it. It's in such a mess. If I'm bereaved of my children, well, then you'll suffer. Nope. Well, then I'm just bereaved, I guess. If I lose, I lose. Notice that the desperation they're all in has united them. This is incredible. Do you see it? There's no threat of punishment by Jacob to his sons if they fail him. If you fail, then this. Like, no. If they fail, they all die. That's what happens. They're all in this together. They're all broken together. And they've put away the constant angling for the edge to get the edge over the others. They're all together now at the mercy of God. It required them all being brought to death's very doorstep with much sorrow and pain. But now that they're there, they are finally seeing themselves as one family. Their fate is bound up together. They belong as a group. They're united together. Their future is bound up in the lives of one another. As a family, they've cast themselves on the mercy of God as a people. So far as they seem to think, there's not much reason to hope. But beloved, if they were recalling the promises of God and the things God had told to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then surely they would have every reason to hope now that they're all looking to God. Things are going to be good. They're going to turn now. I mean, we look at it as very hopeful that they're looking to God. They look at it as still desperate, but I guess we'll look to God. Maybe He'll save us. But the faith does not always come easy under such heavy loads. Every believer knows that, right? When we go through hardships and we're confident in God, we often hear from others that you're people of such great faith. But we know that's not true. God has kept us. And our frail faith hangs often by a thread in such situations, and we can feel it. Like we're barely believing. And it's only the tokens of God and the ministry of His Holy Spirit and the inner workings of our hearts and our minds that keep us believing at all. And so we need not be surprised that while they have rightly cast themselves on God, they also are not mindful enough of His promises to have real confidence in the journey. They're just, we've got no hope but God. God, please. It's like they're going with heads down, thinking this is not likely to work. We're probably all goners, but God, please help us some way, somehow. Many of us have often been in the same position. Verse 15. So the men took this present, and they took double the money with them, and Benjamin. And they arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. You might imagine the serious and desperate looks on their faces as they set off, determined to carry out this plan that they have, however unlikely it is that they succeed. They have no hope but that God would grant them favor in the eyes of this ruler of Egypt, the Lord of the land, as they called him. And that is exactly where God has sought to bring them. This is exactly what God has sought to do. This entire trial has changed them as a family, where instead of bickering and arguing amongst themselves about who will be number one, and pointing the finger about old wrongs that have been done, they are now all desperate together. None of that matters anymore. They just need the help of God. Perfect. Well, what do we say then? All I want to say in terms of final application here, because we're not reading the rest anymore of the story today, is to know that God sees us, He hears us, God cares for His people, He's carefully guiding us into, through, and out of these kinds of severe trials. They had no idea of all that God had been orchestrating. They thought, think of this, they were going into the very den of the lion and the heart of the pit, where only death and sorrow awaited them. But in fact, they were heading for the greenest pastures in the world with laughter and joy in the wings. This was what God had in store for them. But they were thinking exactly the opposite. We're going to our death. And God was preparing something wonderful for them. The choicest parts of the land. They'd be the only people in Egypt not taxed besides the priests. It's amazing what they get. And this is the way it is, right? Psalm 126:6. He who goes out weeping, bearing seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. That's the reality. That's how it is with God. Matthew 7:24 and 25. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. And that's how it feels many times. That's the reality. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. Right? This is what we mean. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12:9 and 10, but God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And then Paul says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I'm weak, I could say because of God, then I'm strong. We read, we sang a hymn today. Fear not, I am with thee. Oh, be not dismayed. I am thy God, and will still give thee aid. I'll strengthen thee, help thee, and cause thee to stand, upheld by my righteous omnipotent hand. When through the deep waters I call thee to go, the rivers of grief shall not thee overflow. For I will be with thee in trouble to bless, and sanctify to thee thy deepest distress. The soul that on Jesus hath leaned for repose, I will not desert to its foes. That soul, though all hell should endeavor to shake, I'll never forsake. Right? Let me leave you with a long quote from Isaiah chapter 43. You could turn there if you want. I'm going to read the verses 1 through 25. And we'll just close with that. Isaiah 43, 1 through 25. But now thus says the Lord, He who created you, O Jacob, He who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I give Egypt as your ransom, Cush and Seba in exchange for you, because you are precious in my eyes and honored, and I love you. I give men in return for you, peoples in exchange for your life. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east, and from the west I will gather you. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth. Everyone who's called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. Bring out the people who are blind, yet have eyes, who are deaf, yet have ears. All the nations gather together, and the peoples assemble. Who among them can declare this and show us the former things? Let them bring their witnesses to prove them right, and let them hear and say, it is true. You are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me, and understand that I am He. Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me. I am the Lord, and beside me there is no Savior. I declared and saved and proclaimed when there was no strange God among you, and you are my witnesses, declares the Lord. I am God. Also henceforth I am He. There is none who can deliver from my hand. I work, and who can turn it back? Thus says the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. For your sake I send to Babylon, and bring them all down as fugitives, even the Chaldeans, and the ships in which they rejoice. I am the Lord, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. Thus says the Lord, who makes a way in the sea, a path in the mighty waters, who brings forth chariot and horse, army and warrior. They lie down, they cannot rise, they are extinguished, quenched like a wick. Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness, and rivers in the desert. The wild beasts will honor me, the jackals and the ostriches. For I give water in the wilderness, rivers in the desert, to give drink to my chosen people, the people whom I formed for myself, that they might declare my praise. Yet you did not call upon me, O Jacob, but you have been weary of me, O Israel. You have not brought me your sheep for burnt offerings, or honored me with your sacrifices. I have not burdened you with offerings, or wearied you with frankincense. You have not bought me sweet cane with money, or satisfied me with the fat of your sacrifices, but you have burdened me with your sins. You have wearied me with your iniquities. So I've done all this for you and been all this for you, but how you've treated me. You've wearied me with your iniquities and burdened me with your sins. Verse 25, I am He who blots out your transgressions for my own sake, and I will not remember your sins. Beloved, what a Savior we have in God, right? Amen. Are there questions or comments we have about as we've considered the desperation of this patriarch and the way that God has brought them to that with this great purpose? Anyone at all?